This is Speaking of Pets podcast, where we give you up-to-date, accurate, science-based information when making decisions about your pet's health.
From experts in dermatology like my sister, surgery, internal medicine, CBD use in pets, the pet food industry, you name it. If it affects pets, we'll talk about it.
Today's Speaking of Pets podcast is sponsored by Blue Buffalo, the maker of natural pet foods. Love them like family, feed them like family. Blue Buffalo offers wholesome, meat-first recipes with high-quality natural ingredients in flavors dogs and cats love. Discover formulas for all breed sizes, life stages, and lifestyles. And with Blue Buffalo's True Blue Promise, that assures that real meat is the first ingredient, with no poultry byproducts, no corn, wheat, or soy, and no artificial flavors or preservatives. Hey everyone, welcome to Speaking of Pets. I'm Dr. Alice Novotny-Jeroman, and
I'm Janet Novotny-King. I am not a board-certified veterinary dermatologist, nor do I pretend to be. I'm your average pet owner and lover, and I kind of make things that Dr. Alice says sound like understandable.
Okay then. Hey Janet, I have the modern day James Herriot as our guest today. And I know he won't like hearing that, but Dr. Jim Rummel, who happens to be a good friend of mine, he's from Pittsburgh, as you'll be able to tell with his accent. Mm-hmm. He is a Penn Stater, undergrad Penn State, vet school, University of Pennsylvania. And then he, in 1979, was employed at Cambro Veterinary Hospital because he married the boss's daughter. We'll talk.
Scandal.
Yeah. Then in 2000, they built a whole new hospital. They had 7 veterinarians there. But he's past president of the Pennsylvania Veterinary Medical Association, was Veterinarian of the Year for the Pennsylvania Medical, yes. And he's also very active in community things like he got a media award for a pet health series on pet grieving, which we've talked about in the past. Mm-hmm. He's always doing something fun. Like when he and I call and talk to each other, he's like chopping wood or making maple syrup, or he's the existential, complete country vet that I love to talk to, because I'm telling you, he has so many stories, and I'm asked him to be on today because I love hearing about all his stories, but also he's been in practice as long as I have. And I know that he can give our viewers a lot of tips on just pet care, stuff that he's seen in 30 years that needn't have happened. Let's just say that. Right. Welcome, Dr. Rummel.
Welcome, Dr. Rummel.
And it's 45 years, actually.
Oh my goodness, you're dating yourself.
Yeah, I am. Well, I was better than dating the boss's daughter, I guess. And she got very upset one night when one of the dairymen we were out for dinner, and he came over and made that comment, and she got up, and she has red hair, and it lit up, and she said, "So you're telling me that my father had to hire me a husband?"
Oh.
And I never heard another word throughout the community. It was great.
I'm going with the story Mrs. Rummel tells.
Yeah.
Oh, Mrs. Rummel's a good storyteller too. But, so you were doing dairy back in the day?
Yeah, I actually was doing everything, but primarily in dairy, a little bit of equine, and then small animal. But we had that grew as time went on.
So what is doing dairy as a veterinarian?
Well, dairy practice now is very much different than it was then. Back then, we did a lot of reproductive work, which you would check to see if an animal was pregnant. That cow needs to have a calf every year to maximize her milk production. And we would do that. And then sick animals, emergency calls, calvings, and we did doctor stuff.
Wow.
Did you deliver a lot of calves, or do when you watch these vet shows on TV, they're always delivering calves, and I always wonder, in nature, isn't it just natural to deliver? Are they all breached now, or what?
Well, no, it's natural, but it doesn't always happen well in nature either. Mm-hmm. The vast majority of them do have normal deliveries. Cows and horses are very different. A cow can be in labor and that for a long time, and can still get a nice healthy calf. Equine, when it happens, it needs to happen. And when you do have to, if it's called dystocia, and when you do have a dystocia, if you're not there, things don't usually go well. But that was probably one of my most rewarding part of veterinary medicine back then, because you're literally bringing life.
Yeah.
You're helping rearrange a foot. And it sounds gross and everything, but you're in a sleeve and you're in there, and they're pulling their head back. They're trying to suck your finger. You're trying to bring a leg back so that they can be taken out. And I've had deliveries of twins one time, triplets one time. I actually had a 2-headed calf one time. It was 2.5 calves, because I had delivered one and was in there and just having a real heck of a time. And I thought it was breech. One was breech or backwards, and the other was, well, it turned out that it had 2 back ends and just 1 front end. And I do have, again, those pictures I said I'm going to try to find somewhere. I have that picture. But
so, Dr. Rummel, when you figured out it was 2 that were connected, what was the first thing you said?
Am I allowed to say that online? Oh, shit. Oh, crap. Boom, but I had to actually had to separate those parts, which is another gross but necessary way of delivering calves sometimes when they're dead, or in this situation we have a instrument that you put in to the uterus, and it has a wire that you can go like this and nothing. It's called giggly wire or OB wire. And at the end of that apparatus, there's 2 holes and a big ball. And you go in and you fit that loop of wire over whatever part, say that part of that extra rear end of that body, the back half. And then you use that. And once that bites, it cuts very quickly. And that was always a teamwork with the farmer, because you're in there making sure that that's not getting anything you don't want. And when you say start and they goes, and you say stop, they need to stop, because otherwise they could, like happened to me. No, I'm just kidding.
I told you he's a jokester.
But no, it sounds gross, but it's I really felt in those times you're helping those people. That's economics to them. Very different than equine practice, very different than small animal practice. That was their livelihood, and you were helping them.
So if a dairy farmer's cows are having calves every year, they're like multiplying. How do they keep up with the size of that herd, or whatever it's called?
They're culling cows that are not producing to the level that they need to be to make that dairyman money. You lose a few here and there. You have bull calves that they sell off. You have animals that aren't maybe genetics that you want, that you sell off. So you're selecting. There's a selection process there.
Wow.
When you had people, owners, farmers helping you in the barn, anyone ever keel over?
From
the blood and everything else?
No, I never had anybody keel over in the barn. There's a great story in a small animal had a woman keel over. Well, I've had 2 people keel over. One was in the office when she saw the syringe and boom. And the other one was in a night emergency. And the gentleman brought the dog around with his wife, and we were getting the dog out of the car, and she plants herself on the driveway. And I'm like, whoa, let's call the ambulance. He goes, oh, she does that all the time. I'm like, well, not here. No, not here. And she had some kind of blood pressure problem. And
she must have gotten up too fast. I bet she got up too fast.
It was concerning.
So tell me, I was telling Janet about the giraffe story.
Well, which giraffes? You mean the delivery, when the mother?
Yeah.
Well,
I didn't know there were 2 giraffe stories.
Oh yeah, one was happy, one was sad. Giraffes are a very odd-looking animal. When you're so used to things that are symmetric, and then you start working on those, they look weird, man. I mean, they're just not built the same way. but that was a live birth, and the mother they're not nice animals necessarily.
Mm. Do they kick? Do they kick, or they
Yeah,
get you?
they will kick you. They will kick you front, front,
Okay.
and they use their head. They butt you. They can butt you pretty seriously.
Wow.
And that was a good that giraffe story was very good. That was a successful birthing. I had another one that developed she actually calved by herself, but the giraffe calf got a navel infection, and we had to send it up to Buffalo to Dr. Pruton, and it responded pretty well initially, and then actually passed. But I have a picture of that giraffe standing next to me like it was my best friend, And they are, well, any young critter they're really nice, they're cool. They're cool. Zebras are the mean. Zebras are nuts. They're
What you did
nuts.
something? What was it? What was the story with the zebra? I forget. You told me.
Well, I used to have to dart them, and they're very, very resistant to the normal anesthetics or tranquilizers, if you will. And one actually I had to work on for like almost all night. And again, Dr. Pruton came down. Are you familiar with M99, Doc?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
It's a morphine, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like 10,000 plus times stronger than morphine. So you have to have a special license, and literally a drop can kill you.
It's
Well,
like what you see in Africa, right? When they're darting the animals there.
Yeah, they use it a lot in hoofed animals and that kind of stuff.
So what does it do? It knocks the animal out?
Yeah, as part of a combination, it's used. But so nothing I used. I had dosed this animal with like 750-pound zebra maybe, and I had over 2,000 pounds of medication in this animal. It wouldn't go down. Anyway, he darted it. And it was fine. Great. Well, and I cleaned this mare out. She was losing her foal. This other mare, well, it was actually the foal, whacked out one night, and it was a Sunday morning actually, and could not use its one hind leg. And we went up, and we had an old Korean War X-ray machine. This thing weighed about 500 pounds, not really, but I mean, so, and you'd have to have your lead apron on, and you're trying to keep something still, and you're holding this thing. So, and then you have to either go back to the hospital, develop these, or we used a hospital that was right next to the Erie Zoo, Glenwood Pet Hospital, and PJ Palumbo was the vet for the lions and tigers and bears. Oh my. I was the ruminant guy, the camels and spitting llamas and, donkeys and that kind of stuff. So this little foal was in bad shape. Took some x-rays. Of course, we had to knock it down, and its back hip was dislocated. I thought, well, we'll just get it in. So I called another one of the doctors. We put traction on by hanging this thing partially from the ceiling to try to put traction, and then let it down. And you know how you roll a hip in, Doc? We tried that, and we'd get it in and pop right out. Get it in, pop right out. So we spent 6-7 hours working on this animal, and we couldn't keep it under anesthesia any longer and we were using injectables. The temperature, it wasn't maintaining temperature anymore. So we decided, my brother-in-law, who is also, he's the son of the owner of the practice. He and I
all in the family, Jim. All in the family.
It was all in the family.
Incestual.
Thanksgiving dinners were great. No, they were. They actually were.
I bet you'll have to carve that turkey, though.
Yeah. Hey, surgical, man. Hands of a surgeon, all of them. So anyway, we arranged with Glenwood Pet Hospital, and we anesthetized this zebra foal with gas, and we did what was called a femoral head osteotomy. After we learned that the reason we couldn't seat that femur was on the socket of the hip. There's cartilage, and that cartilage had broken and fallen down into the the socket, which we couldn't see on the X-ray because it's not, there's no calcium in it. So it made it, we couldn't do it. Anyway, long story short, we did this, surgery that nobody's ever done, and it was great. I did the anesthesia. Dr. Burchard did the surgery. Thing woke up, was doing great. Everyone says it isn't going to do any good. It's going to get too big, and you need the ball, and then anyway, healed up. Thing was doing great, growing, using the leg, all that. Jim Ray, the head of the zoo up in Erie, called me one August night, and there was a thunderstorm. And he said, "You won't believe this, Jim. This foal freaked out again, ran headlong into the side of the building, and our surgical efforts to save him were failed." So it just shows you sometimes no matter how hard you try, no matter what job you do. And I always could not understand that. I'm going to get a little theological here, but if you think about, you're trying to help that calf, and all you want to do is save that calf's life, and it won't let you. It'll pull its head back, or it'll withdraw. And if you're a Christian or whatnot, that's the same thing. The Lord reaches for you to save you, and what do? You pull back. So anyway, it was a very, very great lessons on those.
And it's a true, when I've worked with like raptors and a couple other wild animals, they're truly wild. I mean, people that try to make a wild animal into a domesticated animal, you just can't do it. It's just in them to be fight or flight.
And they've selected for that for how many millennium, Doc? If they're nice, they're going to be food for something. And if they're not nice, the worse they are, the better they are in the wild. People are like that with the llamas and things. You say, "Don't do this, don't do that," up at the zoo, and they always came away with, all over. The llamas would spit on them, or the camels especially. Oh, they're so good, I'm glad I'm not there now with all the selfies and stuff,
Yeah. Well, we were actually at the San Francisco Zoo once when the kids were little, and people were laughing at the apes, and they're in the beauty.
Oh, boy.
And that ape was literally taking what out of its bottom and throwing it at the people. And I felt so sorry for Mr. Ape. I mean, it was horrible. He didn't like being mocked. And you know what? Good for him. I hope some of those people, it was sad. It was really sad, but he was upset.
They had I saw a film in one of my classes that we take, and it was a woman at the zoo that had gorillas, and she was showing the gorilla her baby, and the gorilla was putting its hand on the glass, the thick glass, and all of a sudden that gorilla turned around and ran in, waddled in 2 feet, didn't go with its hands, and brought back its baby, and actually presented it to this woman and her child. And it was like, wow, and that is something that's really interesting too. And I don't mean to get off on tangents, but you go up there, and I didn't work on the lions, but man, I'll tell you, that one lion, I don't doubt in a second she would have eaten me in 2 seconds. And the other ones, I don't believe, but she had that in her eyes. And you look at that elephant, and that elephant, you could almost talk to it. You could see in its eyes a desire, almost, to communicate, just like that gorilla I was talking about. It's amazing. And the whales now, they're finding all that stuff.
Well, even dogs, though, sometimes you meet a dog and they're doing that side eye, and something's going to happen. Do you know what I mean? Like,
body language.
Yeah.
I about got killed at the Albion Fair with a mule that side-eyed me. It was colicked, and the guy told me, "Oh, this is a really bad mule, and this is like 2 a.m." And I go there, and the thing's all bloated up, and he couldn't control it. There's a twitch you put on him, and they put a twitch on, and I'm trying to listen to this thing, and it's eyeing me from the side, and it's just lining me up. And anyway, it did a judo move, it pulled its head up, and he's pulling down on this twitch, and of course then it brings its head down, rears, and just glances off of him, and just right on my thigh. And that's the sound it was. It was like a 2x4 cracking, and I thought I shattered my femur, and it didn't even break, but There's pretty interesting colors the next couple weeks. It really developed some magenta, black, and yellows, and all kind of neat stuff.
What's a twitch?
A twitch is usually a flat piece of wood, and at the end of it, it has a rope on it, a loop, or chain. And what it does, as Dr. Evans from Penn told me, since the horses only have a couple brain cells, if you keep one of them active, they can't think about kicking you. So what you do is you put this over the lip and you twist it and you twitch it, and that distracts the animal so that you can work on the animal, and it also helps you stay into that animal. So if it's trying to get near, you don't want to run away. If you have control, you want to stay close to that shoulder so that they can't kick you or can't.
They used something similar when they caught that alligator on Sanibel that time. It was like a PVC pipe with a noose on the other end, and they hooked it. Yeah.
That's
this is small and this is not expandable.
Right.
It's just a loop.
I should have had one of those with the kids. Human kids when they were little. Get over here.
Jim, did you do much work with pigs at all?
A little bit. Just not. We didn't have any big hog operations here, but they're cool animals. Yeah, they're cool animals too.
Yeah, but as a guy, I would be very afraid with those two tusks that I know in vet school, like a lot of the guys. Well, the big joke in vet school was, for the guys, it's the only profession where you wash your hands before you go to the bathroom because of brucellosis. You're working with these animals and then you're going to the bathroom and you can get brucellosis. So that was the big joke there. But like when you have to go into the pen, I mean, if those teeth, I thought that was very scary.
Well, the worst thing I ever had with that was there was a sow that had little piglets running around, and we were getting them out to neuter them. And I thought I had what do they call it? A farrowing crate. There's a farrowing crate is what the hog goes in so she can lay down and doesn't crush the piglets. Okay. And then she's in there, and then they can let her out when they're done or whatever. But I had the rod that kept the gate down, and I had it in my hand. And she got out, and I started getting back into the box stall, and she saw me. She wasn't quite outside yet. And I saw her turn and whip around, and I went to jump out of the box stall, and I hit the post with that metal pole. The next thing I remember is I'm laying on the ground with this above me. And man, I'll tell you what, that could have been not good. I would rather be in with a boar than I would with a sow with piglets.
With new babies, yeah.
She wasn't trying to make out with you, Jim.
What's that? Oh, yeah.
Make out with you.
I don't think so.
Have you worked on any famous pets like Lassie or?
No, I did. I worked on Smokey Robinson's cat and Roberta Flack's cat when I was in school, but I never met them.
Oh, were they in Philly at the time?
I guess Roberta Flack's cat came to, it was in renal failure.
Oh.
And they were, I was a student. I think I was a third year veterinary student. But it was just like, hey, you know whose cat this is? It's like, yeah, okay, I can tell. No.
So, Alice, what questions do you have?
Oh, well, I was going to ask Jim, when I was in Columbus, we were at the Columbus Zoo and we worked on a gorilla. They called the local human dentist over to do a dental. And of course, when you do zoo animals, you pretty much walk in and they're already sedated. But I never trust that. And I remember I was up at the head and I had to hold up the arm because they were getting a blood pressure. And I can tell you that was like the most solid muscle I had ever. I could barely hold the arm up. Wow. It was the most solid muscle I had ever touched in my life. I mean, it
Yeah.
was like so compact. But then apparently there was an emergency in the sheep pen. So me and another student, we just, ran over. It was no
Run
big deal.
over to the sheep pen.
Yeah, we did. But then at the Cleveland Zoo, they had a clouded leopard that was allergic.
Hold
And
on.
unfortunately, it was their only, yes, thank you, Janet, Cleveland Zoo, yay.
Yay.
And it was their only breeding stock. So they wanted to do something about its allergies. So this is way before we had any other medications for allergy. And they didn't want to have her on steroid. So I went and we skin tested. And sadly, it was allergic to everything. And we actually started it on weekly allergy shots, which are supposed to be given under the skin. But what the handler did with that clouded leopard, they would lure her over to the fence. And then while she was eating some raw meat, they would just pop her. And if it went intermuscular, it went intermuscular. But yeah, it was, I think all of us have. I'm sorry?
Any success with that?
Yeah, it did. The only problem is it's genetic and you don't want to breed an animal has any allergies. And then we also had an orangutan at the zoo who was just lovely. And so he was in the back because all the other orangutans were picking on him, and he had a lot of intestinal parasites, and he wasn't eating that well. So when I was at the Cleveland Zoo in the back, he was in the cage and he's like this, come over. So I came over and he wraps his arms around me, the bars, and him. And I heard the zoo vet saying, I can't remember his name. It was like Harold or Howard. Now, Howard, be nice. Now, Howard, be nice.
And you're going, yeah, please be nice.
But he was.
He was probably stressed out, and he was able to give you a hug. That's cool.
Well, he did. I think he just wanted someone to companionship because all the other orangs were beating him down. And later on, I found out, how in zoos you have to sedate everything to examine it. I later found out he died under anesthesia.
Oh my gosh.
Because he was so weakened, I think, from all the parasites. So yeah,
I mean that's
my zoo
dermatologist didn't have to worry about that, But boy, I'll tell you, that is as I alluded to earlier. I mean, you can do your best and do everything, and animals don't always. It's like people; animals don't always come through. And boy, that is really tough. Really tough.
I imagine you'd have a lot of happy stories, though, like hit by cars that you thought weren't going to make it, and then they.
Well, you know what? We were in an age, I think, of veterinary medicine where you could outreach, you could do things, and learn. And like I mentioned about that laser, this cat had a massive tumor on its upper eyelid, and we were looking at this CO2 laser, and it was brand new. Nobody had it. And I was able to cut a square out. I mean, it was the first time I ever used the thing. And then I made a similar thing underneath the out of the lower eyelid, maintaining the lid margin, and slid that up through, sewed the eye together. 3 weeks later, I mean, it was one of the neatest things in my career to have CO2 laser. That when that came on,
that cool?
Yeah, and but yeah, there's and then when you do something and the animal, like you have really cool animals sometimes, like and you do it and they get better and they're like your buds, but yes, and there's a French bulldog, Bob, and Bob would always come in and circle, and he was an allergy disaster, and Bob always had a different hoodie on. He had these little hoodies. It was so cool. And one time, they would put Bob would hang there, but every once in a while the owner, if it was up on a table, would put it on there. And he would jump a lot, so he'd be up there and he'd have his hoodie on. He's just this little guy, And one time, by golly, they came in with a Penn State hoodie on. I was like, yo, baby. Yeah. No, Maggie, we had this Batuskis. I don't know if I'm allowed to use names or not. The owners had bulldogs. They didn't have children. They had a boxer and a couple of bulldogs. And Maggie was this bulldog. I mean, it was big, long, jaw, and Well, every time Maggie would come in the door, and we knew she was coming in for an appointment, the receptionist in room 4 would put, balloons and all this stuff up, and Maggie would come in, walk to the scale, walk around, walk right in room 4. They wouldn't have to walk right up on the table, and I'd give her rides on the on the table, she'd just stand. It was funny as heck. She loved it, man. The attention and no, there's really a lot of neat animals, and again and I don't mean to bring the negative, but the reality is with veterinarians is sometimes in general practice, sometimes you deliver that puppy in a cesarean, and then 15 years later, the person says, I trust you so much, Dr. Rummel, I'm only going to let you put, Chaco down. And that's very much a compliment, but it's very, very tough on the individual when you have feelings for that dog too. Yeah. And because that dog loves you so much, I want you to kill it, and it's just tough. It can be tough, but obviously the good things, I mean, oh my gosh. And the people and the dairy, when I was doing dairy practice, the people were so cool. Really neat.
I know. I love dairy, and I'm not a large animal vet, but I just love dairy. It's so you get out and you get to see the beautiful countryside, and then you pull into the farm, and the farm dog greets you, and all the kittens are in the barn, and
a lot of times, I mean, that's idyllic, and it is.
Yes.
And this guy, Paul Duran, his name was, out near Albion, and he had like 12 cows, old bachelor, had this hat, and you'd go in at night out after you, and he'd pay you after the emergency, and then he'd tell you to come on downstairs. And he used to, when he would put wood in the fire in his furnace, if there was a scooped out area or this or that, he would set that aside, and he made bowls and he made spoons and all this out of that wood, and which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
And then old Larry Sakula, same thing. His cows were his girls, and he would have this walk, and he had this hat that had, like, it was so glazed, the bill, from going like this with stuff on your hand.
Oh.
Hey, Jim, how you doing, Jim? And he would walk, and he had this old panel truck out front, and his dog would run on the hood and then up onto the top of that, and Larry would throw this frisbee up there to keep the dog busy.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, just really cool stories,
I know.
They really are. And that's why I say we were very lucky, because that was a family operations, most of those, and now it's those are fewer and fewer and fewer.
What was sad toward the end of my tenure at Ohio State, when we were doing dairy calls, you could tell the small dairy farmer that was going under, because we'd be at this big dairy, and then looking at all their cows, and then we'd go to this other one, and guy would come out kind of limping, and the cows were like knee deep in mud. It was you could tell the farm wasn't going to be much longer.
One of the first nights I was doing, the first winter I was there, I had an emergency late, and I didn't know the roads very well. In Edinburgh, Conaughtee Creek goes through it, and it means the Valley of the Snowflake. So, I mean, we get lots of snow, and it's snowing like a bugger, and I'm going to this farm, and I didn't know there was a T in the road, and I just sort of kept going
Oh boy.
out to the field, and I'm on my way to an emergency, and a guy named Lee Payne lived down the road, and I walk down, boom, boom, no problem. He gets up, brings his tractor down, hooks the chain on, pulls it out, and as I say, it was just a wonderful time.
Yeah.
You counted on each other for those things, and it was cool.
Were you raised in the country? Because Janet and I are city girls. We were raised in Euclid, Ohio.
Well, actually, I was raised in the suburbs, but my grandfather on my mother's side, my grandfather Greaves, had a dairy farm.
Oh, so
and I used to go down there, and my mother had a large family. She was oldest of 10, and my one uncle was 6.5 years older than I am. I had an aunt that was like 6 months older than I. That was a big range. And so I would go down, and my Uncle Tom was like my big brother. And he taught me an awful lot about, not just about animals, and I got to hang out with the calves and and jump in the hay mows and all that kind of stuff. But I learned about baling hay and tending the field, fitting it, and that work was not always bad, and that's why I'm probably still practicing. I love what I do, and the people. I always tell, I'm getting off to many subjects, but you run in, and I'm sure you do too. People say, "Oh, I don't like people, so and I love animals, so I want to be a veterinarian." And I always tell them, then be a technician,
Yeah. Yeah.
because when you're a veterinarian, 3/4 of your time is with people. And I love I love what was doing, and I was glad that we were able to transition to a much more modern. I mean, we got lots of neat equipment and grew and did some really cool things.
Did you ever take Linda on any calls with you?
Oh yeah, and the kids,
Oh, the kids
kids.
went too?
Oh, I would take them on calls all the time, and I still have clients that ask about, when I see them out or something now, or since I've cut back, got a real nice letter the other day from a woman that she always wanted to see the pictures of the kids on vacation and this and
Aw.
that, and but oh yeah, we would go, and the Steritania had a little general store, and we'd stop and get our milk, chocolate milk, got to get the chocolate milk, and
Those
I used to
that's from the
go ahead.
that's from the Jersey cows, isn't it? Chocolate milk?
Chocolate milk. Well, no, it's from the black one,
Oh,
from
that's
black. Yeah, yeah,
it's
but
very rare.
yeah, really.
Hey, did you know that for dogs and cats that could benefit from a prescription diet, Blue Buffalo offers natural veterinary diets formulated by animal nutritionists and veterinarians for certain dietary needs like kidney support, weight management, gastrointestinal support, and my particular favorite, dermatology. They make a food allergic diet that's an alligator-based called NP or a hydrolyzed salmon-based for dogs and cats called HF. Contact your veterinarian about these prescription Blue Buffalo diets.
I didn't have a dog for a long time when I came because I was single, and I just was new in town, and so in the middle of the night, you'd be in Edinburgh has a stoplight, I mean, there's not much there. And I'd slap myself to stay awake and talk to myself and all that, running back and forth all over the countryside. So people would look at you like, you're weird. So I got a dog, and I found out that if you talk to your dog to stay awake, even though it's never going to answer you, people think that's cute. So Doc Rummel's not a nutcase. He's talking to his dog. That's cool.
That's a chick magnet.
Got a charge.
It is a chick magnet, but the closest Alice and I ever got to country living was my parents had friends that lived on the Huron River, and we'd go out for a week, and it was literally a cottage with no toilet. We'd go to the outhouse, with the moon cut in it, the whole thing, and they grew grapes and they made wine, and they had a huge garden, and you could fish. And I'll never forget those summers we would do that, and that was quite rural for us.
Well, we also, mother believed in non-pasteurized milk, so we would drive out to Gates Mills to this farm, which
Is
I
that
love.
where it was?
Yeah, Gates Mills, and we bought unpasteurized milk, and they had one bull there, Jim, and then they had all the gals, the dairy cows, and then of course kittens. And I loved it because Euclid, Ohio was one house next to the other. And this was a farm, and it was it was lovely. Yeah.
And we used to get milk, and because it was unpasteurized, it was in a bottle, and it was like a paper lid that kind of right. But on the top was that cream.
Yeah.
That was so good.
I have a good friend that distilled dairies at Twin Brook Dairy down in Bentleyville, near Washington, Pennsylvania. And he has milk everywhere. And Lucy's Ice Cream is a big chain. And they sole provider. It's Guernseys. They're Guernseys. And he has one of his products is called Cream on the Top, and it's unpasteurized, but it's a it's pasteurized, but slow pasteurized. So people even with lactose problems can drink it. Okay, because it's not flash pasteurized. I don't know what the chemistry is behind it, but then it's not homogenized, and it's really cool. And it's Guernsey milk is different, and so that fat is quite it's good.
Did you ever have to deal with many bulls? Because I know it's so dangerous.
I never did
Yeah.
in a bad way. My lab partner in vet school, his father was actually killed by their bull while we were in a Jersey bull.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're very, very unpredictable. And again, people think, oh, well, it's nice,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they're just very, very unpredictable. But it's my uncle and my grandfather had one when we were younger, and then the AI came on, artificial insemination came on, and they're really you could make your herd progress better by using that. The stories of large animal veterinarians, they all have them because of the having to, they don't go out much anymore on emergencies, though. I've learned most of those emergencies, the milk fevers and that stuff, the dairymen are treating themselves. Dystocias and that, it's very hard to get people. And it's
Sad to hear that.
well,
Sad
you
to hear
figure I have in Edinburgh, there were tons of dairies. Right now, we have one,
that. Mm-hmm.
and 8 miles from us is a second
yeah.
one, and all those dairies in between,
Wow.
there aren't any. So, you have to buy certain equipment, you have to have, a vehicle, that, and in fairness to the veterinarian, you have to make money or you can't provide the service. And that's sometimes a very tough, tough lesson. But we used to go to graduations and weddings and all that kind of good stuff that people you met and worked with, and so I'm just trying to. There was a a story. I never told you this story about an elk. There was a guy that owned an elk, and you have to test those for Brucella tuberculosis. And so I got up on the shed, and this elk came out looking, and I shot with the dart gun, and boom, in a little bit, he just went down, massive rack on this thing. So I injected the tail, I drew blood. Well, we're cool. You have to come back in 3 days and actually touch and feel the tuberculosis, see if there's a nodule. You can't just look. And same thing, boom. Although he was a little wary coming out, I climb over. They had 2 sets of metal fences strapped on each other. And I climbed over there and got down in there, and he's laying there with his head back. I touched him. He brought his head forward and scratched my arm. And they have a picture of me, and I swear I was in the air clearing this fence. I really was on it. But man, you talk about a close call, man. He was up. Romping in that is so and it knocks them down. I mean, you use a cc in a regular animal, and in a ruminant you'd use a quarter or 2/10 of a cc. That's so. But those are the kind of stories I think most veterinarians have. Might not be an elk, but it's some scary ones.
Do a lot of people around you have pet chickens?
More and more. And unfortunately, when they ask me if I know anything about chickens, I tell them I have like 5 recipes that are really good, because that sounds crass, but that's what I know.
Yeah.
I don't,
So, Dr. Rummel, we're going to ask you the question: what is your pet peeve? And that can either be an animal pet peeve or a human pet peeve. Like, what makes you nuts?
probably don't want to go to what I really feel about. The animals are animals, and we are to take care of animals. And I guess the way of doing it, and maybe shut some people up, but I'm a strong believer in animal welfare. I am not a believer in animal rights. Rights dictate a responsibility that animals can never have. Okay, but there is a there is a difference. And I think we as a population have lost that as we've drifted from the farms, where we know that bad things can happen, good things can happen, and a lot of that depends on how you treat that animal. You get more unpredictable, or I don't want to say dog. People expect more because they don't know what possible outcomes, and they don't believe you when you tell them. Probably my pet peeve is when you're at a cocktail party and, oh, you're a veterinarian, and then they say, well, I snuck my dog on the airplane and said it was a service dog. And they want you to say, oh, isn't that cute? And I always say, well, now that hurts the people that really need service dogs. And, there's some feeling that it's an inalienable right to break the law when it comes, if you're using a pet to do it. And I don't, because there are genuine needs. I have a number of clients that were in Iraq and whatnot, and they have service dogs, and they're licensed service dogs, and they're real service dogs. And to minimize that as a joke that you're going to sneak around it, that really, really bothers me inside.
That was just someone just put that on Facebook yesterday, that their true service dog was attacked by a faux service dog, and she just really went off on it. And I agree with that. I mean, that's horrible. These dogs are trained just like when we had Dr. Stewart on with her search and rescue dog. For another dog to be on a plane for not that reason and to attack Seamus or something like that, you're right. We can't let that slip.
The restaurant owners and those people don't know that they can ask for a certificate. And if that person does not have a certificate, they have the legal right to ask those people to leave, and they have to. If the restaurant says service dogs only, if it's clearly labeled, pets are wonderful, wonderful things. And we bind to them, and we become emotionally involved in them. They're our best friends, literally, a lot of times. I lost my dog a couple years ago and haven't gotten it. And I go outside still, and I want to yell, hey, what are you doing? And it's just part of you. That animal becomes part of you. And when people abuse that, it bothers me. And they need to be trained so that other people can enjoy those dogs as well.
Well, wow. Thank you so much for sharing. Your stories are absolutely amazing. I can't even imagine.
And now Janet knows what a twitch is.
Yeah, well, you're talking about a twitch. I know this is a twitch. I didn't know what a twitch was.
No, Janet, that's good cocktail talk.
I know.
You could win $25 in some, game or something. Well, I tell you, I've enjoyed this a lot.
Oh, we loved having you on. I just love hearing stories.
Thank you so much,
Janet. So let's close it off. Jim, can't thank you enough, Dr. Jim Rummel. Janet, I'll talk to you later. So this is Dr. Alice Novotny-Jeromin.
And Janet Novotny-King. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, Dr. Rummel.
Hey, thanks for tuning in today. We hope you found the science-based information provided helpful in taking care of your pet. Check out our other Speaking of Pets episodes wherever you get your podcasts.
We'd love to hear from you. So email your pet photos and/or pet peeves to contact@speakingofpetspod.com. Remember to follow Speaking of Pets on all social media.